Hello, everybody. My name is Daria, and I'm a scientific illustrator at my own company, DC SciArt. And today I'm here with Professor John Nolan. And we thought about making a short video about a recent project that we worked on together. So maybe, John, you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Daria. Lovely to connect with you again. My name is Professor John Nolan, and I'm the director of the Nutrition Research Centre Ireland here at the Southeast Technological University. And it has been great to work with you on this recent project. And maybe let's talk about what you do, and I'll talk about what I do, and we can explain why we've put it together.
Yes, I agree. It was a lot of fun to work with you. We connected via LinkedIn and we exchanged, a couple of messages, and then we scheduled a Zoom call at some point. And I just wanted to ask you, how come you decided to work with someone like me? Because I'm doing scientific illustrations for people like you, life science companies, really anybody that wants to visualize the scientific concept. So what was the reason for you to choose someone external to help you with that?
Because a picture paints 1,000 words, in short. And, as someone that's been very lucky to do science that has had an impact on people's wellness, their quality of life, their vision, one of the challenges and it's a good challenge of current time is how we disseminate, how we explain our science to, the stakeholders, which are, other scientists, doctors, patients, people in the general public. And, there's a big movement now in science anyway to connect with society in a way that society become part of the research and understand it. So, to win our grants, typically we have to write 30, 40, 50, 60 pages of text and content and referencing and budgets. But ultimately it comes down to what you've done, what you found, why is that important, what's its impact. And I noticed, and the reason why I really was very happy to connect, I saw some of your other works, your illustrations, and I said, what a beautiful way to tell such an important scientific story and deliver messages in a way that everyone can benefit.
Yes. What actually made, I never told you this, but where I recognized, I totally want to work with you. It was the moment that we had the first Zoom meeting, and then you were talking super motivated and like super, enthusiastic about your research and everything and life in general. And then suddenly you say like, you know what, I have to show you something. And then you left, somewhere in the corner of the office, and then you came back with a huge canvas painting and you said, yeah, I commissioned this from an artist, and and that artist depicted your research in a on a canvas in a more abstract way. And I just thought like, man, this person so like unconventional and so connected to people still, even though being a scientist and me being a plant biologist and you being doing completely the opposite. I just thought like this was like my sign, like, yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
Well, let me do it again. Let me step away and get it, because now we have to show people.
If you want to, yes.
Makes sense.
This is exactly what he did in our first meeting. So I was just,
I'm back. I'm coming back. Don't worry.
Yes, yes.
This is the painting you refer to. This is called Enter. And Marilyn Robson, as you can see, let me make sure I've got that right. Yeah. The beautiful lady in Colorado. I gave a lecture in the US at a conference, a scientific conference. And basically, very unusual interaction after, because it was an hour discussion on a disease called macular degeneration and why nutrition and how nutrition can be beneficial. And this very nice lady who had a strong interest in my lecture because her mom had the disease macular degeneration. And she said, I'd like to draw your science. And I thought, wow, there's an offer you don't get every day. And we had a nice conversation and we supported her to do it. And actually, it's become, we run an international conference called the Brain and Ocular Nutrition Conference, the Bond Conference, and it's become the logo for that conference because it tells the story of nature, the beautiful colors that the carotenoid pigments that we study provide to the world, and thereafter the specific molecules that these carotenoids are in terms of lutein, zeaxanthin, and mesozeaxanthin, and how they find their way to the eye and the brain. And in one picture, our whole field of research has the opportunity to be understood and presented.
Yeah, I thought it's a beautiful piece of art, and I really loved it. And there's just like, it just shows that that's just one way to depict science and combine it with art, right? So now you mentioned a couple of your scientific interests. Do you want to jump in immediately into what we did, what illustrations I did for you? And you can, feel free to share the science.
I think that would be great. And what I'd say before we even do that, from a learning perspective, I mean, science begins with an idea. So an idea is only important if you can communicate the idea, typically to a reviewing body, okay, where you're trying to get research funding from. And I think as a reviewer, someone that sits on the other side of the equation also, how refreshing is it to have a hypothesis presented to you, where you have kind of like an illustration or a picture that, and it can be the difference actually between a scholarly scientist actually understanding the full idea that the researcher is trying to present and get funding from. So it's important from the very beginning of research. And then, as we move into the research and conduct the research, and if the hypothesis is proven and you want to explain, for example, why nutrition has a role to play, well, these images help you do that. In a way, nobody reads text anymore. Our brains have been changed. We don't like to read so much text. Okay, it's important, of course, but I think the future of science is storytelling and illustrations, and your brilliant work is going to help a lot of people be very enjoy and be very successful at what they do in research. So I appreciate your work greatly.
Yes, and I'm actually also really happy to be able to do that, because it's, as you said, it's also super time saving, and people immediately get concepts they might take a longer time to understand. And also when it comes to a little bit of human psychology, if you have an illustration done that represents your research, the person that looks at it immediately feels like you actually care, that they know and understand what you do. So you immediately like bond in a way through your illustration, through the scientific illustration that has been done for you, or you've done yourself. So that's a really great way actually to connect to another person that you might not know, but maybe that person that wants to get to know you, wants to collaborate with you, or give you the grant, or allow you to publish, or whatever.
And I think we should say it again. Like, the other point is that this is an opportunity, in my view, to take science out of the laboratory, to take science out of the publication, the thesis or the scientific paper, and to put it into the place where the people that can benefit from the science or need to understand the science can really become part of the science. My mom or my 8-year-old daughter can look at your illustrations and straight away get a comprehension about something that is in theory out of reach to everyone. Our science shouldn't be out of reach. I don't think you're a good scientist if you make your science so complicated that only you get it. You have to communicate it. So yeah, why don't we have a look?
Yes, let's have a look at the slides. So John, to make it as accessible as possible, the science that you do, you also choose to have it illustrated by me in a little bit more fun and comic-like looking style. Instead, like, throw the eyes on it and make it engaging.
I think you were surprised, right? You were a bit surprised that I was happy to have a comic style approach to this, no?
I do have clients that want this, but you were extra enthusiastic about it. You were saying like, oh yeah, of course, like let's just do it and do things differently. So that was really a little bit of a difference to other clients.
Well, it's funny because even when I'm working with the students here who are working on their PhDs on the various research questions, like I talk about the characters in their research. I feel the elements of the research are alive. So the molecules we work with are alive. They're doing something. Our technologies are active. They're state of the art. They have a value. So I always look at science as a story, because that's what we're doing, and hence why illustrations are so important, because it's storytelling. And hopefully, if you're lucky, your scientific story is interesting. And I think this is interesting, right? So I mean, the idea from this one I mean, you did all the work. We just spoke to you about it, but people don't really understand what carotenoids are. And we're now teaching children and kids in school about carotenoids, because one of the big challenges of our time is nutrition and access to the right types of nutrition. And if you think about medicine and sickness and wellness and unwell, you know, we typically wait until we have a serious problem before we try and address it. And if we look at all the age-related diseases in the world, they're all in some way connected to lifestyle and nutrition being a modifiable positive factor. But one of the things I've learned from my understanding of our own works and that of others is that, you know, it's not about a silver bullet at the end of the equation. It's what you do over time. And I have this expression, from the cradle to the dance floor, because if we look at nutrition, you know, we look at, so the first time a mother feeds a baby, that beautiful color in the colostrum, the bright colors that you see are actually the carotenoids. They're because they have color. Carotenoids are pigments. And you know, when we talk about nutrition, or you know, you typically never go to talk about carotenoids or the value of carotenoids. And I'm totally biased because I love carotenoids, but they are very special. And the idea of this illustration was to show something that I call biological selectivity. So the idea being that from when we start getting access to, when we look at nature in the first instance, you can have carotenoids in foods. So we see the typical example used is the carrot, and beta carotene is an example of a carotenoid in the carrot. And let me, by the way, define what a carotenoid is. It's not a vitamin, it's not a mineral. They're pigments, they're plant-based pigments that have beneficial capacity for nature in the first instance. So they work in plants. Photosynthesis exists because carotenoids protect the plant from the damage that would be caused. So we wouldn't have access to oxygen if it wasn't for carotenoids. So it starts right there. And all the beautiful colors you see in natural foods, you know, peppers, egg yolk, the beautiful color here that we see in the egg yolk. Any of the green plants are just masked. They have color too if you get rid of the chlorophyll, right? But so the beautiful colors we see, and that's why we talk about having a colorful plate. Okay. Now there's unhealthy colorful plates too. You have synthetic colors, or you have, you know, artificial colors, but really in good nature we see this. But what I was amazed about when I started doing this research was that, you know, there's about 700 carotenoids in nature, probably more now. I think we're only at the tip of the iceberg in terms of our understanding, and wonderful scientists from across the world, you know, Antonio in Spain, and we all learn from a professor called George Britton, who was the godfather of carotenoid work. So we've read all his books, of course, but understanding carotenoids and their value to nature is where this is really interesting at the beginning. Okay. And, you know, I'll move along the story quickly, and then maybe we can come back, and I'd like to talk about your experience of trying to create this. But the biological selectivity piece was that from the 700 in nature, we consume about 40 to 50 in a typical Western diet. And then I call our blood system our taxi system. So these are, you know, these carotenoids have to go through a very detailed process to get into the blood system. They have to be bioavailable. They have to be broken down. They have to join with micelles, and they're transferred through the lymph system and eventually get into the blood system. And if they're in the blood system, and if they're in appropriate amounts, they can find their way to our target tissue. And the target tissues, there's many of them, you know, anywhere that there's fat in the body, basically. So we have them in our skin, and we have them all over our body. But we've been doing a lot of work, of course. This is your picture of the eye. And what I point out here, and you do it lovely, is that the concentration of these carotenoids, and now let's say what they are. They're lutein, zeaxanthin, and mesozeaxanthin. So these are 3 of the 700 carotenoids that are in nature. And they form this beautiful yellow pigment at the back of the eye here. So the back of the eye, which we know is the retina. If we look at the center part of that, it's the macula. And the macula is only about 4% of the entire retina. but it gives us over 90% of our vision and all of our color vision. So it's a very specialized part of our light sensitive tissue that is the retina. And as a nutritional biochemist, I was just amazed that, you know, when I started working with ophthalmologists, when you look at it and you see this yellow pigment, and in medicine back over 20 years ago, nobody really spoke about what this pigment is doing. They were looking at it every day. They were seeing it. But it just wasn't part of medicine. It wasn't part of understanding. But scientists from all over the world, and our own laboratory included, have been working to try and understand that. So yeah, that's it. They're plant-based pigments. We do not have them if we do not eat certain foods. They're entirely of dietary origin. Another challenge of today's world is that the foods we consume are suboptimal in terms of the amounts that they have. And there's some reasons for that. You know, one is farming itself makes it easy for a crop, for a plant to grow, right? That's what farming is. And even good farming does that in an easy way. I must point out here that the carotenoids exist in the plants for the plant's benefit. They don't care about the humans. But if the plants don't need these protective pigments, they'll underproduce them. So there's a devolution of these carotenoids with over farming. That's one. And the other, of course, is the change in the atmosphere in terms of CO2. We published work ourselves on the effect of CO2 on suppressing carotenoids in plants. So we have a challenge.